Welcome to the Install and Setup Package CCE presentation. This presentation will provide you with an overview of the installation of all packaged CCE components, as well as the post-install setup procedures. Packaged CCE requires 5 components be installed. These components include Cisco Unified Contact Center Enterprise, Cisco Unified Customer Voice Portal, Cisco Unified Intelligence Center, Cisco Unified Communications Manager, and Cisco Finesse. Each component is installed as a virtual machine on a UCS C260 server. Some components, such as Communications Manager, require multiple instances be installed. Packaged CCE also requires redundancy servers be installed on a second UCS C260. Based on the requirement for redundancy and the need for multiple instances of certain components, the installation process may require the creation of up to 17 individual virtual machines. Since some integrators will find that they deploy packaged CCE quite often, and others only once or twice, Cisco has provided 2 methods that may be used to complete the installation process. The first is called the direct install method. This is simply a standard install method that requires each virtual machine be created individually from the ground up. The other method is called the golden template method. This method has you create a reusable template for each type of server that you will need to create. Typically, the direct method is used by integrators that do not plan on doing a large number of these types of integrations. The golden template method is used by integrators that expect to deploy a large number of packaged CCE solutions. Let's take a closer look at the golden template method. A golden template is basically an image of a server after the base install is complete and before any configuration has been done. The idea is that each install of a particular type of server will require the same base software, so why not just copy the base image to each server of that type? Since there are 7 different types of servers, 7 golden templates will need to be created, one for each of the following types of servers: Cisco Unified Contact Center Enterprise Call Server, Cisco Unified Contact Center Enterprise Data Server, Cisco Unified Customer Voice Portal Call NVXML Server, Cisco Unified Customer Voice Portal OAMP Server, Cisco Unified Communications Manager, Cisco Unified Intelligence Center, and Cisco Finesse. While there are 7 different types of servers, only 2 different types of operating systems are used. Since the creation of the golden template is similar for components that are based on the same operating system, we will not explore the creation process for each component, but rather for each of the 2 operating systems. Let's look at the steps required to create a golden template for components that run on a Windows-based system. This would include the Cisco Unified Contact Center Enterprise Call Server and Data Server, and the Cisco Unified Customer Voice Portal servers. First, download the appropriate OVA file from Cisco. The OVA file defines the virtual machine settings. Next, use the OVA to create the virtual machine. Windows 2008, R2, and Service Pack 2 must be installed, followed by the installation of antivirus software. Now you are ready to install CCE or CVP. However, if you are installing the CCE data server, you must first install SQL 2008. Next, enable Remote Desktop and VMware tools. The final step is to convert the virtual machine to a golden template. Communications Manager, Unified Intelligence Center, and Finesse use the Voice Operating System, often referred to as VOS. The first 2 steps for creating templates for these components is the same as those used to create the previous templates. First, you must download the OVA file and use it to create the virtual machine. Next, depending upon which component you are provisioning, you install either Finesse, Communications Manager, or Intelligence Center, using the Skip Install option. Now install VMware tools and convert the virtual machine to a template. The process of converting the virtual machine to a template is fairly simple and straightforward. First, make sure the virtual machine you are going to convert has been shut down. Now, from VMware vCenter inventory menu, right-click on Virtual Machine and select Template, and then click Convert to Template. The name of the golden template should be made the same as the name of the virtual machine. Once the golden templates are created, you must populate the automation spreadsheet that is included in the automation tools that you may download from Cisco. The information entered in this spreadsheet is used to configure base information for each of the components that you are installing. Once the spreadsheet is populated, use the Power CLI to issue the command that will begin the automation process. vSphere Power CLI is a command line tool built on Windows PowerShell. In order to complete this task, you'll need to ensure that vCenter and Power CLI are installed on the workstation. The command includes the path to the script, the path of the spreadsheet, the IP address of the vCenter, the vCenter user, and password. If successful, the process may take several hours to complete. However, no manual intervention is required during this process. Once completed, a status report can be found in the report folder. If you do not plan on doing a lot of packaged CCE deployments, the direct install may be a better choice than the golden template method. The direct install requires that you install each component independently. The initial install is similar to the golden template method in that you need to create the virtual machine in the same manner, but you need to create more of them since you need one for each individual component. In a typical deployment, you may need to create up to 17 virtual machines. Once a virtual machine is created for each of the components, you will need to configure them. Next, we will look at what the configuration process is for the following components: the CCE call and data servers, the CVP servers, the communications managers, the intelligence center servers, the Finesse servers, and the voice gateway. To configure the CCE data server, start by checking the network adapter settings on the VM for both the public and private networks. Next, power the VM on. Now configure the network cards by renaming the first one to Visible, which is the public network card, and renaming the second one to Private. Now navigate to Disk Management and initialize the database drive. Next, configure the encryption utility by uninstalling and then installing the SSL certificate. Now, using the Unified CCE Web Setup, configure the logger. Next, using Unified CC Web Setup, configure the administration and database servers. To configure the CCE call server, start by checking the network adapter settings on the VM for both the public and private network adapters. Then power the VM on. Once the VM is powered on, it is important that you do not reboot it. Also keep in mind that it may take 5 to 10 minutes when it needs to restart. Next, configure the network cards by renaming the first one to Visible. This is the public network card. And rename the second one to Private. Next, configure the domain manager by creating the Cisco root, facility, and instance OUs. Now configure the encryption utility by uninstalling and then installing the SSL certificate. Next, using the Unified CCE Web Setup, configure the router. This is done from within Components Management. Now run Peripheral Gateway Setup and add a PG of the type CUCM. Configure 1 CUCM PIM and 4 VRU PIMs. Next, access the Peripheral Gateway Setup and add one more PG of Client Type Media Routing. Also add a multi-channel and outbound PIM. Now configure the CTI OS server and install JTAPI. To configure the CVP server, start by checking the public network adapter on the VM. Next, power the VM on. Now configure the network cards. Next, enable the CVP Operations Console by ensuring that the CVP OPS console service is running. Next, configure the CVP call server and the VXML server. Now, using the CVP Operations Console, configure the gateway and media server. Next, you will need to transfer the scripts and media files. This is done by using the CVP Operations Console. Now configure SNMP by defining community strings and notification devices. The final step is to provision CVP by configuring a SIP server group and the dialed number pattern. Before configuring the communication manager, you must first configure VOS for the application. This is done by creating a floppy image using software that was included in the automation tools. Next, you need to configure the subscriber using a similar process. Now you must activate the required Communication Manager services. This is done from within the Cisco Unified Serviceability Interface. The rest of the steps are done from within the Communication Manager's Administration Interface. Begin by configuring Communication Manager groups. Next, configure the appropriate trunks and SIP options. Now create an application user. The ID should be the same as the one you entered when you configured the CCE peripheral gateway and the CTI server. Now create a route pattern and configure conference bridges, media termination points, and transcoders. The final step is to create media resource groups and lists. To configure the Intelligence Center, you must also first configure the VOS. This is similar to what you did with the Communication Manager. Create a floppy image using the software included with the automation tools. Then configure the subscriber in a similar process. Next, sign into the Cisco Unified Intelligence Center and configure the data sources. Now, configure Intelligence Center reporting by configuring the SQL user accounts and data sources. The final step is to configure syslog and SNMP in the Cisco Intelligence Center Administration Interface. The first two steps for configuring Finesse are the same as Communication Manager and the Intelligence Center. Begin by creating the floppy image using the software included in the automation tools, and complete a similar process for the secondary node. Now configure the CTI server settings and restart Tomcat. The final step is to configure the administration settings. This includes defining the IP address of the primary and backup data servers, as well as all of the login credentials. The final device to configure is the iOS Enterprise Gateway. This is not a virtual machine, but rather an iOS device. The configuration of this device requires iOS configuration knowledge. From the iOS command line interface, configure the following: network interfaces, global settings, voice codec preferences, CVP services and settings, gateway and SIP timers, dial peers, hardware resources, and SIP trunking. Now that all of the servers are configured, there are just a few final tasks that must be done. First, download the base configuration file from Cisco, and from the CCE data server on side A, import it using the ICM DBA tool. Next, complete the pre-validation steps, which include modifying the network VRU labels according to the customer's routing patterns. The final step is to change the deployment type to package CCE deployment type. This concludes the presentation. You should now be familiar with the steps required to install package CCE. You are encouraged to review the package CCE install documentation available at cisco.com for more details.